We have not really, as a country, created space to begin to dialogue and be accountable for what racism has done to people in general. For Salinas itself, the work that we've done to recognize racial equity and racial healing has left a whole number of people from city government to community with a language, with a perception, and with some practices that have now integrated this work.
There was a group of young people that wanted to put together an event called Salinas, which is the only youth-led open streets event across the nation. We supported them along this process to get the event to happen. In order to do that, we leveraged our relationship that we had started to build with the city of Salinas. Building healthy communities is looking at health holistically. We are trying to improve the lives of residents and really looking at it through a policy and systems change approach.
We had been working closely with building healthy communities, and we had had some great successes working on programs like Ciclovia. It was an enormous logistical effort, and we looked at that and said, if we can do this, there is more that we can do.
That kind of led to the work of economic development because it was the first time that the city had trusted BHC to get something done. Our relationship was really strengthening with the city around this process. And then you have the 4 officer-involved shootings, and 4 men, Latinos, were killed.
That happened between Salinas cops and a man that was armed with garden shears.
Less than 2 weeks after officers shot and killed 26-year-old Osman Hernandez outside the Mi Pueblo market.
There are already plans to demonstrate at City Hall tonight following that officer-involved shooting.
Located just south of the Greater Bay Area, the Salinas Valley is known as the Salad Bowl of the world. Around 3/4 of the city's 160,000 residents are Latino, many of whom work in agriculture. Like many American cities, Salinas neighborhoods are racially segregated. East and West Salinas are physically divided by the 101 freeway, the low-income Latino population almost exclusively making up the East Side. Over time, a pattern of discrimination in the city emerged in which East Salinas received significantly lower budgetary allocations for schools, roads, and public space than the west side of the city. Starved for city development dollars on the one hand and subjected to targeted policing on the other, the 2014 police shootings sparked a public outcry to these long-simmering tensions.
It came clear in some of the tensions that were expressed in a few demonstrations that race clearly was at the center of this. We needed to somehow face that challenge.
I sat down with a representative of the California Endowment. I said, I feel like we need to do more. And she said, you do need to do more, and this is what I want you to do.
Our program manager, Lauren Padilla Valverde, proposed the idea, why don't you go to this Racial Justice Institute in Oakland, put on by Race Forward.
As a result of that trip to Oakland, it became clear that the next step was to take some action, commit to additional training, and explore the unique approach in the city of Salinas.
I think for the city officials, what it did for them, that training, was help them drop some of their natural defenses and begin to widen their gaze to ask themselves the question, are there policies and practices that are actually creating more division? And if we developed a different set of practices, could really bring people together and make things better.
I wanted to introduce Rinku Sen and Jerry Teo.
In 2014, city officials and BHC, partnering with Race Forward and the National Compadres Network, jointly launched the Governing for Racial Equity Initiative, or GRE. GRE's first phase would offer training and consultation to both Salinas city staff and residents to address the traumas caused by structural racism, as well as identify policy-based solutions.
I was attracted to the idea of the trauma and healing framework because so much of my work has put me in touch with the tremendous mental health toll that racial inequity takes on people. Certainly, it takes a tremendous toll on the people who are victims of racial inequity and who are suffering from it. But fixing those situations is also an emotionally fraught process for the people within systems.
The beauty of this training is it's the head and the heart. It's the head that really are talking about policies and procedures and structures and all of that. But the heart of it really are the people that are moving this along. We've done it from that ground up, really trying to change the hearts and the minds of people that are working in systems so that they then would have the wherewithal and the will to then begin to look at how we change policies, how we change systems, how we change structures.
In order for people to do things differently, they often have to build up the emotional muscle to be able to hear the critiques that are coming to them with an open mind and heart. I found that in our trainings, white city workers, in the 2 days that they were hearing from their colleagues of color even, that certain practices of the city have a negative effect, just their emotional openness made them able to understand, oh, I can have a good intention and still be carrying out practices that have a bad impact.
Nos vamos aquí a entrarle a la plática. Las disparidades en base a raza, clase o género existen en nuestras comunidades.
Creo que eso es algo que estamos haciendo muy diferente, construyendo comunidades saludables, es siendo explícitos en que tiene mucho que ver con la raza. Y mañana es cuando vamos a tener el primer entrenamiento en español sobre los conceptos de la justicia racial y el papel que juega la sanación transformativa. Primeramente les quiero agradecer. We asked for a Spanish resident training because our population, the majority, is monolingual speaking. Folks were able to have really honest conversations because we got to a place where we could be really vulnerable.
I never want institutions to be on their own in doing racial equity work. The effort to make this city into a racially equitable city is deeply grounded in the actual participation and the investment of residents.
Es muy bueno este tipo de talleres porque nos da eso que necesitamos, aprender para poder llevar y entender más a nuestra comunidad para hacer cambios.
One of the things that I've been most impressed with in this training is that I can see the way that the system runs and how there are racial differences that separate people from the system.
One of the things that has been so different about this training is seeing where that real lived experience comes from. That's been kind of hard, knowing that there hasn't been a lot of trust in this community, and we're going to have to prove that we can change.
The real test of the GRE initiative is not only about how it can transform individual attitudes, but also how the initiative can address structural racism by changing the allocation of resources and real-life outcomes for disenfranchised city residents.
The city is really being intentional on who they have on hiring panels. Specifically, I've sat on panels to hire police officers, which I think is something really critical to our community. Often we hear that police officers that are being hired don't necessarily look and reflect our community. I was surprised to find that we were talking about race as a factor, something that I don't know would have happened before the trainings. We did a lot of trainings around budget with an orientation on racial equity and healing. This year during the city budget was the first time that we felt the city staff had actually taken careful considerations in budgeting. They actually started allocating funds in places like library and community services, investing in walkability for our community. 2 parks on the east side received more funding than other parks on the other side of town, which doesn't usually happen.
We had a limited amount of money to make repairs to playground equipment. Every one of the playgrounds that was worn out was in one of the poorer parts of our town on the east side, so those are the ones we fixed. Now that sounds really simple, but it was really complicated. We're constantly pushing up against a political framework with an elected official that believes they know where the resources should go. And us having to stand up and say, no, this is where the money goes. On a larger basis, there are multiple planning efforts underway, including what we call the Alisal Vibrancy Plan.
In one of our economic development meetings, there was a Latino farm working resident that said, why don't we have a plan specific for East Salinas, given that there was a downtown vibrancy plan? We heard that and we thought it's an excellent idea. We should be pushing for it. And so we did a lot of advocacy work in getting the city to really look at investing in an Alisal vibrancy plan.
The Alisal Vibrancy Plan is a blueprint for investment in the city's largely Latino East Side. As the main thoroughfare running between the east and west sides, Alisal Street is also the site of the annual youth-led event, Ciclovia.
The fact that their community on one same street is segregated from one point to another, it just impacts the way our community is built. There's people that had never come to the east side of Salinas, and they see that there's so much here that's to be offered. And the fact that Ciclovia helps unify both sides of town, it's something that has really come to change the perception of Salinas.
Now let me be real clear, this is going to be a long-term process. There's particular projects that we see that you can talk about, but more, there's a whole ideology that is changing. And I think when you change the ideology and you begin to change systems, now that's really transformative.
Structural racism, this is a monster of a problem. This is deeply rooted in our nation, in our county, in our government, our state, everywhere. I think because I have been so invested in the work, I'm really optimistic on its outcomes.
We look at GRE as a systemic intervention, one that changes the fabric and culture of our organization so that we become more relevant to our community, more connected to our community, and have a better understanding of how to serve our community. We need each other in this time to build the city that we all want and to transform a city that's old, has had struggle, and wants to go forward and wants to be new.